Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to continue a series that I've been doing where I've been looking at the various challenges in the Path of Exile Ultimatum League, and today we're going to look at a set of them that you're going to need to do if you want to get to 24 challenges in order to unlock this Ultimatum Pet, which is quite simply a Vaal Toucan. So when I saw that there was a Vaal Toucan reward, I was like, you know what, I really need to get that. And so I thought I'd put together this guide for getting 24 challenges. The first guide in the series covers what I feel are the easiest of the challenges, and it will cover 14 of them. So if you've done all 14 that are in the first part, then you're in the right place. We're going to be talking about the next 11. So there's 11 that I feel are in the middle, and there's 15 that I feel are harder. They'll be in part 3, where we're discussing what you need if you want to go for 36 or 40 challenges. So without further ado, let's go through them. If you want to download this spreadsheet, it is on my blog, sirgog.com. So, firstly, Complete Encounters 2. This requires you to do 4 things. 3 of them are kind of easy. 1 of them requires a moderately strong character. So that's the reason that it didn't make the first 12. Firstly, you need to pass through a Delirium Mirror. This one's trivial. Actually, completing the combat encounters past the Delirium Mirror can be a little tricky, but just passing through it, they're in 4% of zones from Act 5 onwards, so it's just RNG to find a Delirium Mirror, but you will find one probably before you complete the core storyline, and then you'll be able to just walk straight through it. If you're up to it though, definitely continue pushing through once you're through the Delirium Mirror, and try and fight some of the quite tough monsters that'll be on the other side of it. It'll be all the normal monsters from the zone, but they will have damage reduction. They'll also hit harder than they normally do, but there'll also be some new ones as well. Delirium Mirrors are a lot of fun when you encounter them in maps. They're pretty rare and they're very lucrative, especially in high tier maps. Next up, we'll come back to complete a rare blighted map. It's the hardest part. To defeat a Legion General, you'll need to find a Legion monolith in a map. They're found in 8% of maps. And then there is a chance that when you touch that Legion monolith, that there will be a Legion General spawned. Once that happens, just go and kill the Legion General. So you'll have to break it out of the ice, then you have to fight it. You can force a Legion General onto a map by using a Gilded or Winged Legion Scarab, and you're only going to need 1 of those. So for that reason, I think you'll find it's pretty easy to get done. Omnitech in Temple of Atsuatl requires you to do 4 of Elder's Incursion missions, so that's 12 total incursions, 4 lots of 3, and then that will give you access to the Temple of Atsuatl. Once you've done that, you need to then get to the top to fight the Omnitech, so that means you need to have unveiled an entire path through it. It should be pretty easy, although Elder's missions can be pretty tough combat encounters at first. Once you get the rhythm of them, they're alright. Lastly though, rare blighted map. Blighted maps will drop about 1 in 4 times that you encounter Sister Cassia in a map. So Sister Cassia being an NPC that brings up the tower defense minigame, and blighted maps are the big version of the tower defense minigame. Most of the damage that you need to do, you will want to do yourself, like with your character, not with the towers, but towers can certainly help you. The thing that makes this a bit tricky is that you don't get that many shots at it, because you're only going to get Cassia once in, she's in 8% of maps, and then you're only going to get a blighted map about 25% of those maps. So you're going to get 1 shot about every 50 maps that you do, and then additionally, you need to actually beat the blighted map encounter. The easiest way to beat a rare blighted map is to use Transmutation Orb to get yourself a very easy magic blighted map. Then use alterations possibly if you don't get it. If it's not really easy to start with, then use a Regal Orb on it. Get yourself something super, super, super easy, and that will be the easiest way to do this challenge. Alternately, you can, of course, just basically build a more powerful character and do rare blighted maps that have got 8 mods on them. And if you can do that, then you will certainly find lots of good rewards there. Next up is Complete Vendor Recipes. This is a tutorial for a lot of the vendor recipes that are in the game, some of which are quite obscure, particularly the Jade Flask one. So we'll go through all of them. Chromatic Orb is selling a 3, 4, or 5 linked item that has a blue, red, and green socket all linked to each other, and that is not a 6 socket item. For a Jeweler's Orb, you need to sell a 6 socket item. For a Gem Cutter's Prism, you need to sell either 1 gem that has 20 quality, or a collection of gems that collectively have 40% quality or higher. For Prismatic Ring, you need to sell all 3 different types of 2-stone rings in 1 transaction. So that can be, that means it's got to be 1 of them that's fire and lightning, 1 that's fire and cold, 1 that's lightning and cold. Jade Flask will come back to in a sec. 20 quality gem, you need to sell a level 20 gem and a single gem cutter prism. Inscribed Ultimatum, you need to sell 5 Inscribed Ultimatums in one transaction and you'll receive 1 back at random. This can actually be pretty lucrative in trade leagues because you can often pick up really bad ones really cheaply, then just vend them en masse and hopefully get something amazing back. Most of the time you'll get rubbish back, but sometimes you'll get something good. Metamorph Catalyst is last. Here you need to vendor 3 total catalysts. They can be the same as each other or different, doesn't matter. What you receive back will be a random catalyst that does not match any of the input catalysts. So for instance, if you vendored 3 of the attribute catalysts, you could get any random catalyst back except for the attribute catalyst. If you decided to be really silly and vendor a prismatic catalyst, a fertile catalyst, and an accelerating catalyst, then you get one of the bad catalysts back at random. So basically one of the rest. Okay, so going back to the Jade Flask recipe, there are 2 options here. The first option is probably the easier in the sense of it's easy to get the component pieces for, but it's also more hassle. And that is to sell all 3 different resist flasks. A topaz flask, a ruby flask, and a sapphire flask. So not the amethyst flask, the chaos resist one, but all of the other 3. You will need to have them be magic, and their suffix will need to be of reflexes. So that's the evasion mod. So that's your first option. The other one, though, which I think is easier for most people, is just to vendor 5 magic Jade Flasks, all of which are identified. You'll then receive back a unidentified Jade Flask as your return. So that's what I'm going to do. I haven't had Jade Flasks on my filter, so I'm just going to put them back on, get for myself 5, and then use this recipe. Next up we have Complete Encounters 3. This is a little bit of a tutorial of past league mechanics, but slightly more tricky than Encounters 1 was. So, a possessed unique monster. The easiest way to do this is the Shore map. The Shore map has a boss that when they fall to 50% health, and again when they fall to 25% health, they will release Tormented Spirits. What you want them to do is to release these spirits, then you instantly stop dealing damage to the boss. The Tormented Spirit will then fly into the boss, and it's not the end of the world if you stuff it up the first try. If you keep attacking for too long and the Tormented Spirit either dies or flees, because there'll be, there's always another Shore map. Secondly, you've got open a unique strongbox. Glenac Cans is an Atlas region, and I do apologise that my spreadsheet says Turns End. It is Glenac Cans that has the Maven points Twice Tempted and Tamper Proof. Allocate both of these, and Tamper Proof will cause all of your strongboxes to be at least rare and to be corrupted. In my experience, this causes you to get more unique strongboxes than you otherwise would. You shouldn't have too much trouble, although you might need to do sort of 20, maybe even 50 maps in Glenac Cans to do that. Also, use your ambush scarabs, not necessarily your better ones, your gilded and winged ones you can sell to other players, but your polished ones and your rusted ones, just use them in Glenac Cans as well. Likewise, any infused ambush crafts that you get from Harvest, also use those to force more strongboxes onto your maps, and you'll get this in time. It's not something you'll get quickly. There are a couple of ways that you can more deterministically get this, but I don't really recommend them. I think it's better just to do more maps in Glenac Cans. Okay, so next up we have Encounters 4, which is a precision boss kill. Firstly, for Sanguine Siren in Crimson Temple map, while all players are affected by temporal chains. Now, the first thing I'm going to say about this is going to affect both it and the Promenade map one after it, and that is that you do not get credit for this if you have a Warding Flask or some other outright immunity to curses affecting your character at the time the killing blow is struck. So, if you normally run with a Warding Flask, take it off your hotbar for this fight. So, for Crimson Temple, what you want to do is apply Transmutation Orb and then Alteration Orbs to a Crimson Temple map. Keep going until you get Temporal Chains as a curse affecting all players in the zone, and then run the map. For Blackguard Avenger and Blackguard Tempest, firstly, I've personally tested this and found that it only matters that the second one to die, you're affected by conductivity at that point. You don't need to be when the first one dies. That makes it easier. You can pull the Blackguard Avenger away. The Blackguard Avenger is the melee one. The Blackguard Tempest is the lightning spellcaster. The Avenger will follow you aggressively. The Tempest will not. So it's easy to pull them apart. Pull the Avenger away and just murder him. Once you've done that, go back to the Tempest. The Tempest casts an aura effect on the ground, like a bad spot on the ground effect. You want to stand in that. That blue circle that he puts on the ground, she puts on the ground, that will cause you to suffer conductivity while you're in it. So you'll take more lightning damage, but you can survive it, undoubtedly. The Blackguard Tempest doesn't have any hard-to-dodge skills, so just stand in that and kill the boss. Make sure, again, no Warding Flask active, and this should be really easy. Third one's a little harder. Nightmare's Omen is Malachi, Map Malachi, in Primordial Pool Map, while there are at least 8 Rune Flare Traps active. So, Rune Flare Traps are one of the abilities that Map Malachi has that conjures a little explosive bit of rune, or little explosive rune on the ground. If you step over it, you take pretty painful damage. So, first thing, you don't want to be stepping on these runes. Second thing, you don't want minions that are stepping on the runes. I had quite a bit of trouble with this because I'm playing a character that uses golems. Eventually I realized the best way to deal with it was to simply do the fight with my golems inactive. Next thing I want to say about this is that it is easier if the map is twinned. The reason for that is that with 2 copies of Nightmare Omen, you can kill the first one while there are 4 Rune Flare Traps from each of them. I was having a lot of trouble getting 8 Rune Flare Traps active at one time when I was first trying this, but I found that when the map was twinned, it was easier to do that. Lastly, defeat Mirage of Bones in Leyline map while there are at least 3 clones active. This is a precision kill. This is quite difficult on a lot of builds if your damage sort of has uncontrollable chains. And that's the case for my character at the moment. I've had a lot of trouble with this one. The first thing to note, Mirage of Bones has a little shenanigans thing that they do where they fire an arrow into the air and then drop down somewhere else. But this can either be the player skill Blink Arrow or the player skill Mirror Arrow. With Blink Arrow, you fire an arrow into the air, the arrow comes down, and your character teleports to where the arrow lands, leaving a clone of you behind, and that clone keeps attacking. With Mirror Arrow, the same thing happens except that you don't move. So sometimes the Mirage of Bones will move, sometimes it won't. The cloned versions of the Mirage of Bones have very few hit points comparatively to the real one. So the easiest way to track which one is the real one, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either inflict a curse on the boss straight away, and then track exactly which one is cursed. That will work, although it does have the difficulty that curses expire, and you might accidentally inflict a curse on one of the other ones as well. The other thing that you can do is you can corrupt your leyline map. If you do this, the real Mirage of Bones will gain the affix corrupted, and that can help you track them. In any case, you need to work out which one's the real one and then use a powerful single target skill to kill them. Lastly, you can bring Mirage of Bones pretty low in life. If you can get them under 10% life, then as long as you know which one's the right one, you can hit them with something that's got Culling Strike, and when there's 3 clones up, and splat, boss dead. Next we have Turning Divination cards. There's a bit of a tutorial as to what divination cards exist, and I want to go through these. So Stack of Currency, the easiest one is the one that drops all over the place. I think it's Emperor's Luck. It drops all over the place in the maps that have a sort of outdoorsy tile set similar to the Act 3 Imperial Gardens. So Gardens map, Courtyard map, a bunch of others. You'll have this in a terrace map. You'll have it in no time. Just need a set of 5 of them. Turn them in, you'll get a stack of 5 of a random currency. It'll almost always be terrible, but that's okay. Unique map, the easiest one to get is a set of the map. What is this one called again? I'm just going to check that one quickly. It is called the Encroaching Darkness, I believe, and it is. It turns in for a random unique map, and so it's something that you get, like, it's sort of semi-rare, but it's not staggeringly rare. You will be able to get yourself a set of that reasonably easily. Item level 100 item, you can either turn in a set of the Opulent, which is probably the easiest one, or probably the one I'd recommend because the actual items that you get from it are kind of okay, can be okay. You can turn in one that gives you an item level, or Destined to Crumble, which gives you an item level 100 armor piece at random, or you can turn in the Dapper Prodigy, which gives you a 6 linked piece of armor with item level 100. There's also a bunch of other ones. But the Opulent is one that you will get a full set of without trying. I think you need to do 2 or 3 Chateau maps and you will have a set of that. To implicit corrupted unique item, the easiest one to get a set of is Arrogance of the Vaal, which will turn in for a random to implicit crangled unique. That divination card drops in Ancient City and Sunken City. I've also heard unconfirmed reports that it drops in Foundry map, but I cannot confirm this. I have not seen it personally. 23 quality gem, there's a few options, but the Bones is the easiest one to get a set of. It drops a lot in Delve. For an influenced item, the easiest one to get is a set of Prejudice, which drops from Veritania's minions. So this is, in Veritania influence maps, Veritania's packs of monsters will semi-frequently drop a divination card called Prejudice. Usually by the time you've killed Veritania 3 or 4 times, you'll have a set of this, and you'll turn it in for a unique item, which will be something that could be created by a chance orb, and it will be influenced. Encounters 5 is a bit of a tutorial of some of the past league mechanics that were changed in this league. So firstly, we have upgrade a Breachstone using a Breach Blessing. This can be a bit tricky in solo self-found. You need a matching Breachstone and Breach Blessing. This might require quite a bit of farming, and you'll need to pick up all of the annoying splinters. The easiest way to get yourself a bunch of Breachstones is mapping in Lyra Arthane, where there's a couple of Maven passives that will help you there. To open a Labyrinth Trial from your hideout is just as simple as taking a offering to the goddess and putting it into the map device. Using a Veiled Chaos Orb. Veiled Chaos Orbs are considerably rarer than Exalted Orbs, but you can target farm them by getting the character Aisling into research, the research department of the Syndicate, and when you do that on tier 4, you get a really precious reward, but if you do it on tier 1, 2, or 3, then Aisling will grant you Veiled Chaos Orbs. So you just got to use one. You can also pick them up in trade. These are really strong. Veiled Chaos Orbs on good bases just have so much potential to roll good things. So do keep them in mind as a crafting tool, especially if you're looking to, if you've got sort of 20 Chaos Gear and then you've, in each individual slot, you've saved up a couple of Exalted Orbs and you're looking for something better. One thing that you cannot go wrong with is picking up, say, an item level 86 set of influenced two-tone boots and slapping a Veiled Chaos Orb on them. There is just so much potential for that to go right. I mean, of course, it can go wrong as well, but if it does, you just use another Veiled Chaos Orb and you should be fine there. Itemizing Incursion Temple requires you to complete 4 Elva missions to get a completed temple, and then don't open the temple the first chance you get. This is really awkward. Just talk to Elva, let her show you the completed temple, walk away from Elva, then walk back up to her, ask her to view the temple, and there'll be a button down the bottom that says Take Temple Chronicle. Once you've done that, you've itemized an Incursion Temple. That is all you need to do. Next up is Defeat Conquerors of the Atlas. So I have separate guides for Baran, Veritania, Alhesman, and Drox. I do not have a guide for Cyrus, but I do recommend that you check out Don the Crown, a Twitch streamer who has an excellent guide for Cyrus. So, you need to make these 80% item quantity. This requires you to roll them while they are in Veritania's bench. The easiest way to do this is something you probably can't do anymore, and that is to do the 80% quantity the first time that you fight the Conquerors at league start. But I'm going to assume that you've missed the opportunity to do that, and you've got to do it on a 4 Watchstone version because you've earned 16 or more of the classic Watchstones. At that point, you're going to be in for some fairly tough fights here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The dangerous mods you need to be careful of. So what you want to do is start with a map that'll be scoured. You want to hit it with 4 chisels first, and then you want to hit it with an alchemy orb. If it is not over 80% quantity at this point, you want to either scour Allocate or chaos it. But if it is, these are the mods you need to be afraid of. Baran the Crusader, you need to be afraid of anything that increases his cast speed. If his cast speed goes up, the fight gets tremendously harder. Otherwise, he is basically the same fight with any of the other mods you could get. And so, you can just mess around with all the other mods, but cast speed is terrifying on him. Veritania the Redeemer is one of those fights that the quicker the fight is, the safer it is. And so for that reason, anything that makes her considerably tankier is kind of scary. Additionally, her maps are a lot scarier with multiple projectiles active. Although I don't know for certain whether multiple projectiles affect her or not. I haven't actually tested that. Alhesman the Hunter is a lot scarier with multiple projectiles. and also is a lot scarier with increased action speed. That can make him a lot harder. That can make the snakes in the center a lot more likely to hit you, where both of those mods actually can make them a lot more likely to hit you. Drox the Warlord is terrifyingly difficult if he gets increased damage reduction against whatever your main skill is. You do not want things that make Drox tankier. He already takes a long time to kill. And the reason that that these sorts of mods, so things like monsters have, let's say that you're dealing physical damage, things like monsters have 40% increased physical resistance. These are really scary because they mean that you will take longer to kill the banners. And those banners grant invulnerability to Drox and give him an opportunity to recharge his energy shield. So that's really scary, and ultimately you don't want anything that makes his banners meaningfully tankier. For Cirrus, you don't need anything on him, you just need to fight him as he is. Ultimately, Cirrus is a pretty tough fight. If you don't know how to do it, and you're in a trade league, you can get help from someone else. But ultimately, if you do want to learn the fight, and I do recommend doing so, you can remove Watchstones from your Atlas before opening the portals to the Eye of the Storm. And if you do that, then Cirrus will be reduced in power somewhat. And that just makes the fight more forgiving. You can make more mistakes. You can get away with making more mistakes. The hardest part of Cirrus is actually recovering after you suffer a death in the fight. So when you suffer a death in the fight against Cirrus, you will then have to get back into the arena, which can be quite tricky. He loves firing die beams at you before you realize where he actually is. He also loves setting up spinning negation beams in awful spots. But that's Cirrus. Ultimately, practice will make perfect with that fight. Or even if it doesn't make perfect, it will get you to the basics. Next up is Complete Encounters 7. So this would have been, for some of these, would have been a 12 of 40, but it has a couple that are a bit harder. Defeat a Metamorph in Tane's lab. So Metamorphs, you need to harvest the parts by fighting Metamorphs in maps. You'll need to get one of each of the 5 different organs and then take them to Tane's lab and fight them as a conglomerate. That one's pretty easy and straightforward. Defeat a Delve boss, you'll need to delve down, down, down until you find one of them. These are uncommon. They're like maybe even rare, but they're not staggeringly rare. You'll be able to find one. Ultimately, though, the bosses can be pretty hard. All the Crystal King is one of the hardest bosses in the game. The other two are a bit more forgiving, and the YouTuber and Twitch streamer Crouching Tuna has excellent guides on how to do them without being hit at all. Now, he takes a very specialized approach where he goes all out on the damage against these bosses. You don't need to do that, but I think you'll find that his guides will be fairly useful. He makes extensive use of Frost Wall in order to protect himself from being hit by enemies. You don't necessarily need to do that unless you're doing these fights super, super, super deep. Bestiary bosses, you're just going to need to get a bit lucky here. When you're running your Ironheart missions, you're going to need to find the appropriate beasts, and you can get more of them by mapping in Lyra Arthane with the relevant Maven points allocated. Ultimately, though, whilst getting a specific Bestiary boss and the desirable one, Feral, can be quite rare, just getting any of them is not. And Sakawal and Creation are a bit more common, whereas Venomous and Feral are rarer. Now we have the interesting one. Defeat a map boss while under the influence of a Divine Shrine. So, I got this really early, and I've had a couple of opportunities since then to do it. Divine Shrines are pretty rare, but they come up a fair bit if you're using Sextants on maps. What Sextants will do is sometimes they will give you a mod, this is the Awakened Sextant version, adds 2 Sextants to a map, adds 2 shrines to a map. One of them is a Resonating Shrine, or one of them is a Gloom Shrine. But then there's one other random one as well. That random one will not usually be a Divine Shrine, but sometimes it will be. When you see a Divine Shrine, and they're the ones that have the mathematical symbol phi, well, Greek letter originally, above them. So it's like a circle with a vertical line through it. Once you do encounter one of them, what you want to do is clear the whole map except for the boss. Then go back to the Divine Shrine, jump back to your hideout for a sec, grab all of your movement speed flasks, and then just tap that shrine and run to the map boss. Once you're there, you're invincible. You got 45 seconds. Kill a boss. You'll be fine. Next up, we have Allocate Atlas Passive Trees. This is a bit of a grind, not going to say. This is a milestone. And for most players, I think you'll hit this at about 500 maps, although if you focus on it, you can do it with about 250. You're going to need to do all of the 10 passive skill points in each of the main 8 core passive trees. Note that you don't need to do Uncharted Realms here, you just need to do 8 of the normal ones. And so this is going to take a fair bit of mapping. The very minimum you can do this in is about it's about 50 to get to the first one, then it's 28 in each region of the Atlas. Most players, though, so 250-ish, but most players will take a bit more than that in order to get all of them. As I say, I think you're probably going to need to do 500 maps to get there. Next up, we have complete maps with 8 mods. So 1 in 8 times that you use a Vaal on a map, you'll get an 8 mod map. They'll be much harder than usual maps, and they will then be something that you will that you'll find will be pretty tough to beat. But they certainly, whilst they put up a fight, this will be something that you can easily enough do. It's just basically something that you will get through natural gameplay if you're running enough high tier maps. Next up, we have complete Ultimatum Encounters 4. Now, this one is all about just recognize, so play naturally and do Ultimatum Encounters normally. And then when you're sort of most of the way to this, you'll notice you're missing 1 or 2 of them. The first one I want to point out is Unlucky Criticals. Unlucky Criticals is not all that hard for most builds. It causes you to be under the effect of a reverse Divine Flask. However, Unlucky Criticals will not spawn until you're in yellow maps or higher. Everything else on this list you can get in lower tier maps. Unlucky Criticals is exclusive to yellow and red tier maps. So you need to be in at least yellow tier maps in order to do this. But you'll probably find that there's about 3 or 4 of them that you haven't found. Maybe 1 or 2 of them that your character is just flat out impossible, finds flat out impossible, like lightning damage from mana costs. Which is here, lightning damage from mana costs. If you're playing an Archmage build, you simply cannot beat that mod. And what you'll need to do is either team up with someone else or change around your character a bit. Maybe just do low tier maps, remove Archmage support, and just sort of struggle through them, and you'll manage them anyway. So the ones that are hardest here, Limited Flasks is probably the hardest of the lot. That's the one that causes, when you turn on 1 flask, it turns off all your other flasks. Hindering Flasks can be tricky, as it causes any of your flasks that you use to inflict a 50% move speed debuff on your character, although that can be trivialized by a jewel that is corrupted to grant you immunity to hinder. Otherwise, though, most of these are pretty reasonable. You just need to recognize which ones you need, and then just target them when they show up in maps. Okay, so next up we have complete unique maps. Here you need to do any 15 of the 18, which basically for most people is going to be everything except Perandus Manor, Doriani's Machinarium, and the Vinctar Square. Those are the rare ones. Alternately though, if you find yourself in a position where you're in solo self and you just can't get a couple of them, what you want to do then is bring up the Zana points in the the Zana mission points that you can spend in the Uncharted Realms. Allocate those, and then you'll find that some of the rare maps will show up quite a bit in your Zana missions, and that can help you fill out the list entirely. Next up, we have Ultimatum Encounters 6, and I'll just bring that up here on this one as well. And here you need to complete the final wave of an Ultimatum Encounter whilst affected by each of the following high tier modifiers. Now, Stormcaller Runes 3 is the dangerous one here. So everything else is fine. I actually would have said this was something to do in your first 12, except that it's got Stormcaller Runes 3. And also Raging Dead 3, but Stormcaller Runes is the really dangerous one. So, Stormcaller Runes 3 just deals staggering amounts of lightning damage. You're probably going to want to do this on a scoured map, and you're probably going to want to do it in a low tier map. And then, if you do derp and take a couple of hits, you'll still survive it. Ultimately, Stormcaller Runes 3 is just brutal. If you step in any of those lightning circles at any time, you're going to get hit with a massive bolt of lightning, and it is going to wreck you. Raging Dead 3 is pretty dangerous as well. That's the one that causes the Fire Skulls to spit fire at you. They do tremendous damage, and they are much, much, much worse at tier 3 than they are at tier 2. And even at tier 2, they can be pretty sketchy as well. The rest of these mods are all pretty reasonable. Razor Dance 3 people were scared about early on, but then when you actually try it, it's fine. I've actually done Razor Dance 3 even on a character without Corrupting Blood immunity, and it was fine. If you've got a flask that can grant you Corrupting Blood immunity, then it's trivial. Otherwise, you'll need to be a bit careful with Stalking Ruin 3 and also potentially with Restless Ground 3. You can easily hit 7 Ruin, so maybe take those ones late in the ultimatums. Anyways, that's a number of challenges. So overall, I think I actually covered 13 challenges in this video. There were 14 in the first one, so that should get you enough to get you to 24. If you've got any comments or questions, though, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you later on this week for the 36th video.